Hi, it's James Saracen here with our next hot topic discussion, or battle if you want to call it that, for drummers. And the question is front bass drums heads, the resonant head, porthole or no porthole. It's hard for me to say no porthole very fast, but I'm going to go back in time and explain a couple of things really quick. In the old days, they didn't have portholes in the front of the heads, and I'll just stick with primarily. I'll go back and talk about Buddy Rich and whatnot. Had a big 24-inch bass drum, and he had felt strips for muffling. And then John Bonham, 26-inch bass drum, but he did have muffling. He had felt strips. When I first started, my first kit came with felt strips. It was very, very common then for a lot of the drummers to do that. And then over time, I believe Ringo probably had felt strips. Late 60s, early 70s, he started seeing drummers trying to get more of a dry sound, but also I probably came out of the recording process where they often started taking the front head off and putting a blanket in there and going for a super dry sound, and then in post production or whatever in the recording process, putting whatever effects they needed on it to get the sound that they wanted. And if you listen to a lot of the early 70s studio stuff and some of the Eagles and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of the late 60s stuff, as the rock became more, it became drier sounds, single headed toms as well, a lot of that. But um, some people didn't like the fact that they would have to take the lug inserts out to keep them from rattling. So they started cutting holes in the front head and putting it back on a big hole so that they could still have it a blanket in there and adjust it as they did, and then stick a mic in there and make it work. Well, that became over time a smaller and smaller porthole, and for a big chunk of the early 80s, early to mid, even toward the later 80s, it was very, very common to have a 10-inch hole in the front head, right in the middle, and then you could put a pillow or a blanket in there. You could stick your hand in there and move it if you were traveling. Open the case, stick it in, adjust the pillow, stick a microphone in that hole. It became very popular, and you could get this nice dry sound, and then with whatever effects they wanted, they could make that sound longer or whatever they needed to do. And you notice that coming a lot from the rock world and even the metal world. And then as they started playing a lot of the faster type things, they wanted more attack and less sustain so that they could play more intricate patterns and whatnot. And you started to see uh, triggering eventually came in, but some drummers wanted the hole to be smaller so it wasn't so dry, while others wanted it to be super dry for articulation purposes. So the portholes started becoming smaller. They moved off center so that they could still get a microphone in there or stick their hands in there to adjust it. And then you started seeing some trends come in where it started going back again because they actually started making some drum heads that had muffling built into them, muffling rings of some kind. They still sell the strips because a lot of people still like to do that, but uh, they have heads with this built-in strips. The marching heads for the bass drums have a built-in felt strip inside a mylar pocket, and we've all seen the Evans head with the outside ring on it. I'm drawing a blank. EMAD, and Aquarian has the Super Kick 1 and 2 with the felt uh, ring glued on there. And then they've also started doing it for resonant heads too, for the front head, so that you didn't have to put something on it. Now there's all kinds of mufflings where people put towels and stuff taped to the head, but now you can buy heads that have that. So it's eliminated the need for some people to have that uh, need for a hole in the front end, for a port, as they say. For me, I grew up having it. I actually prefer a porthole, and the reason why I do, even if it's a small one, is to get the air to escape. Because a lot of the stuff that I grew up playing with rock, I buried the beater into the head. I did go for that dry sound with a pillow and a smack, with a hard beater. And um, At the time, it was hard felt because we didn't have all the options that you have now. And I wanted that attack, right? And then uh, I tuned it where however I needed to do, but I had the air escaping the drum, so I got this, and then they were able to boom, boom, do what they needed to do for recording purposes or live purposes, and it worked out great for me. Um, Dave Weckl came to town one time. This is in Boise, and used my Maple Custom drum set. And I'd spoken to him in advance, and he said, "I do not want a hole in the front bass drum head." So I had Remo send me because I had a Yamaha head with a hole the way it came, and they sent me a black head. I think it was black. I still have it. It's in a box. But Dave, when he got there, I took the head off, and I said, I didn't put this on because I didn't know what you wanted to do with it. He said, good. And he literally said, can you bring a hammer and a nail with you? And I said, yes. So I got there, and he took a hammer and a nail and hammered right through the drum head a series of holes around the head, almost in maybe, I can't remember if they were lining up or not with the tension rods, or it might have been a little bit more. And they were maybe an inch or so, possibly a little more than an inch, all the way around the front head. That way he could get the full head and have a lot of resonance out of the drum, but also have a little bit of air escaping. That head is, I think DW actually markets that way, and I'm not sure if Remo did that for, I know they do it for DW, if they did that for Weckl on his heads or not too. And then after he was gone, I took the head and off and I kept it. But I still prefer a ported hole because I bury the beater. If you have a head that doesn't have a port of any kind, and again, a lot of the modern heads are pre-muffled, so they, like I said, Bonham was muffled. It didn't have a hole. A lot of the heads now, you don't need the felt strips because a lot of them you can buy pillows that are made for that. You can also have the heads with the muffling and pillows. And some people say they just prefer not to have a hole. If you bury the beater, it makes it difficult if you don't have a porthole because you almost will hear the pitch of the drum change as you press that beater into the head. So that becomes the argument. When I say porthole or no porthole, it depends on how you play and the style of music that you're going to play. For me and the way I like to play anything that's heavy, I prefer a porthole. Smaller, but a porthole. If I'm playing a jazz thing or something like that and I'm playing flat-footed and I'm pulling the beater off of the head, it doesn't matter. If I'm going to bury the beater in any kind of way, I prefer to have a small porthole. Now, again, I think that with the technology and a lot of the drum heads that people have come up with now, all the companies have come up with some great options that have such built-in muffling that you can get a great drum sound that can be mic'd without excessive sustain or resonance based on just the heads. But you have to learn how to tune it and you have to learn how to play it because you do have to play it a little bit differently. You cannot bury that beater without any kind of muffling in there. And again, like I said, I feel like it's if you took a tom head and you press the stick into it, that's almost like burying a beater. If you hit it and bring it off, it's fine. But if it had a single drum head or it was cut out of the bottom, you could press that stick and hit it and kind of bury it and get closer thing to a bass drum sound of burying the beater. I bury the beater on the rock, so for me, I prefer the ported. However, I have tried both, and they both work great. I do think it's a personal decision. It's like master traditional grip. It's like muffling or no muffling on a tom, the way you tune, the way you angle your drums, the cymbals, everything's an argument of some kind, but it's a personal choice, a personal taste. The trend has gone back to no porthole now, though. I will say that. I do feel like it'll flip again at some point. It always does. And for me, I'm interested in hearing your comments, not to start arguments, but just to see what your thoughts are on this process. Across the room, it's not set up right now, but I have a Buddy Rich Slingerland kit from the late 60s, early 70s, and it's a 24-inch kick, and I have the felt strips, and I have 0 holes in it because I'm going for that traditional sound, okay? I recently sold an 18-inch bass drum that had no hole. It did have the front head had the little muffling ring on it, and I had tried to comment several different heads on the playing side to give them a try. There's a great fiber skin head that has a ring on it that sounds killer. But anyway, my favorite rock bass drum head is um, it's the Black Dot. Gosh, I'm drawing a blank on the model number, but it's like an Emperor with a black dot. Might be a like a Power Stroke Power P4 with a black dot or something. It's a great bass drum head, but again, I still had a ported hole in the front, and I would put a pillow in there touching both sides. Not a lot, but just enough to touch it so that I can get a great whack out of that drum, and then I use 90% of the time when I was using my mics, it was a D6 by Audix, and I got this a killer bass drum sound. So again, I see artists that are some of my favorites that still use a porthole and some that don't. So it really comes down to the way you're going to play. I don't think there's a wrong way or a right way. I think it's how you feel or what you feel is going to be best for you. So give me your thoughts on the subject.